Dark rides have been entertaining guests since the late 1800s. Starting as simple mill rides, they've been constantly evolving, integrating new technologies, weaving more immersive stories, and bringing thrills into the equation. Prior to 1999, Disney had been the undisputed king of dark rides, essentially bringing them to the mainstream with the opening of Disneyland. However, in 1999, Universal had a chip on their shoulder, and a desperate desire to prove themselves as a true competitor to Disney. This led to them taking a major risk with the construction of their second Orlando park. Universal was going to attempt to combine every technology they could get their hands on and create a world-class dark ride that wouldn't just rival Disney, but beat them. And I believe they were successful. Before we get further into this video, I do really just want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for the support in the last video. It was really nice after, all the work that went into that, just to see people really enjoy it the same way. It meant a lot. And I'm just really grateful for all the support you guys have given me so far. So, yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's jump all the way back to the beginning of what we would end up calling dark rides. Old mills or tunnels of love would begin showing up at fairgrounds in the late 1800s, giving guests a very slow tour of different vignettes, atmospheres, or tunnels. The execution was basic, but for the time it worked. Guests would flock to these mill rides as a place to unwind and do other things. Just watch the Defunct Glenn Garfield video if you want more info on that. This is not the place for me to explain that to you. We don't have a lot of time here. But as time went on, another form of dark ride would sweep the carnivals and parks in the 1930s. This is when the pretzel dark ride would be introduced and popularized. This leap in innovation brought individual powered cars that would ride on a track through a building with theme show scenes. This would become basically the core of every single dark ride since, telling a story through individual show scenes that the guests are moving through. During this time, pretzel dark rides became commonplace at parks across the world, and guest expectations began to rise. Over time, the rides become slightly more elaborate, but in 1955, the opening of Disneyland would cause another massive leap forward in terms of dark ride technology.
It's a Peter Pan fly-through, and go on in there, kids. They ride in pirate galleons that hang on a monorail. Are you having fun? And you're going to get a ride through here, and the pirate galleon is hanging on a monorail, and it flies, first of all, out through a moonbeam sea, out over London town, and down below are all the lights twinkling. And it looks as if this is going to be one of the most exciting rides of all, because as they go through, they see everything that Peter Pan saw.
Walt and his Imagineers would take the pretzel dark ride and create far more elaborate show scenes than had been done previously with Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Peter Pan's Flight took this technology and flipped it below the track to bring a new sense of immersion and storytelling to the ride. And the Jungle Cruise would show that combining the story scenes of pretzel dark rides with a boat like the old mills could still provide an entertaining experience even in the daylight. All of these rides also placed guests in the role of a protagonist in the story. Guests weren't simply observers, and while it took them a while to warm up to this idea, eventually it worked, and it's still how most dark rides are positioned narratively today. Over the years, Disney would continue to refine and expand the idea of their dark rides. Pirates of the Caribbean and Haunted Mansion would try to blend the narrative-focused rides they had done previously with the sort of cocktail party spectacle that Small World provided, creating dark rides without one clear storyline, but many intertwined ones, playing into an overarching theme beyond just spectacle. Also, with Adventure Through Inner Space and the Haunted Mansion after, the Omnimover system allowed designers to control guest vision and create a more personalized experience for each guest. It can't be overstated how much Disney was the leader in the dark ride landscape. While regional parks would get dark rides, they were never close to the scale and ambition of what Disney was doing. Disney knew this, and they treated it as their bread and butter.
Hello, I'm Michael Eisner, Chairman of the Walt Disney Company. To celebrate this very special evening, we're proud to present the television premiere of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Tighten up your sneakers and get ready for a joyous romp through a world you've never seen before, unless you happen to be an ant. This really is something else. It's a different world down here. Look at the size of that coffee cup. My secretary would love it. She don't have to fill it once a month. Anyway, enjoy tonight's special feature. I've got to figure out a way to get off of this desk.
When Michael Eisner took over the Disney company in 1984, in reality, it was actually his son Breck, saw a need for more thrilling attractions at the Disney parks beyond just what they had to offer already. Tony Baxter and his Imagineering team took this in mind and would end up taking technology that was being developed and used by the military to train pilots and create what would open as the first major simulator dark ride in a theme park with Star Tours in 1987.
Are we ready, George?
Yes, we are.
How about you, CP3?
Oh, yes, Master Michael. Thank you. All right, everyone. Prepare for the ribbon cutting.
It's the combination of creativity and new technology. When you add technology as one element and creativity as another, I think you get 1 and 1 equaling 4, frankly. And the ability for Disney to be the leader in not only creativity, but in technology, and the marriage of the two, to me, is a great accomplishment.
1, 2, 3.
Star Tours was an incredibly innovative ride at the time. Instead of having to recreate the Star Wars universe at this large scale for a high-speed ride, Disney was able to simulate it in the very constricting adventure through inner space show building. Disney was able to create a thrilling dark ride in a box, and the public ate it up. Parks around the world would instantly take notice, especially Universal, who had already been working on the idea of a motion simulator prior to Disney Star Tours. Universal would open their Orlando park with the Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera, which was a far less thrilling simulator with the screen separated from the actual ride motion. They then would quickly follow this up with Back to Future the Ride, which also still kept the screen separate from the ride, but would be far more thrilling in terms of what it had to offer. At the same time, Disney would end up cloning Star Tours to their new MGM Studios park to bring their simulator to the East Coast. With 4 simulator rides proving to be cost-effective hits at Disney and Universal, and computer graphics taking these massive strides forward, the 1990s would see a boom in simulator rides across the world, seeing them installed at smaller regional parks and kind of somewhat cheapening the experience. Also in the 1990s, 3D movies saw this major resurgence in pop culture. Now, Disney had been using 3D movies in their parks for a while at this point, but the movie itself was always kind of the main attraction. Now, over at Universal Studios Florida in 1996 though, they opened Terminator 2 3D, which combined a 3D film with this full stage stunt show. And this show got rave reviews and ended up becoming a staple at many Universal parks until the late 2010s.
I definitely think Universal has raised the bar a little bit with Terminator 2. They have combined moving 3D images that go from one screen to the other.
Let's go. We don't have much time.
There are interactive live actors on the stage that go back into the screen and become 3D characters and back out. And it's seamless. You feel it, you see it, you experience it like I've never seen before.
This fusion of 2 different existing attraction types would go on to help inspire Universal in future attractions, including one at their soon-to-be-announced second park in Florida. In the early development for what would become Islands of Adventure, Universal had a plan to partner with DC Comics to create this land centered around the classic DC heroes and villains. And Universal knew this meant that they needed a major ride themed around Superman. Now, at the same time, Universal was also in the midst of the theme park wars between them and Disney, which I talked about a lot in my last video on Eisner. But for our purposes today, Universal had this massive chip on their shoulder, and they really wanted to beat Disney at their own game. So as Universal's business arm was working on those pesky Superman rights, Universal's creative team tasked a young, somewhat unproven, but visionary employee at the helm of the ride's development, in Scott Trowbridge. But Trowbridge wasn't alone. He was partnered up with industry veteran Terry Koo, who was overseeing the development of the entire land. These two would lead a large team of creatives and work alongside many industry partners to begin developing ideas for the Superman ride. The ride was originally intended to use the ever-popular Omnimover system, like Disney's Haunted Mansion or Adventures Through Inner Space. But they wanted to combine the Omnimover with both 3D screens like those in Terminator 2 3D, as well as some practical effects to create an immersive experience. They also thought this could create a more thrilling dark ride without necessarily being a thrill ride. These concepts didn't get too far, however, because in 1995, Disney would open Indiana Jones Adventure: Temple of the Forbidden Eye, which would introduce the enhanced motion vehicle dark ride system. In this system, a wheelbase that moves forward along a slotted track is equipped with a motion simulator base on top of it. This allowed Disney to simulate motion while also advancing a vehicle through real practical sets. When Indiana Jones opened, Trowbridge and Thierry immediately knew they needed to change from the OmniMover system and adopt some sort of motion simulation into the Superman ride. Universal, however, had the advantage of a few extra years of ride technology development. And those few extra years made a huge difference. Oceaneering International, whose main business was developing deep sea rovers of all things, assisted Universal in creating their own version of an enhanced motion vehicle, which we now refer to as the Scoop. This vehicle solved a lot of major problems that Disney had faced with their EMVs. Unlike those, the Scoop system was relatively lightweight. It had the ability to spin freely 360 degrees. It was able to make more precise and sharp movements. It minimized the use of hydraulics, which were the source of a lot of problems for Disney's rides. And the Scoop's track was much more subtle because of its OmniMover-esque sightlines. It could end up being mostly hidden from guests.
We are marrying a 6-off motion base, and you can see here the guts of the 6-off motion base. This is the part that makes this whole vehicle do this. So we can simulate, flying, falling, bumping, hitting. At the same time, we have a system that spins the entire structure around. You can just spin it around and around and around all day long if you want it to. Very impressive to watch this thing go, especially close up, because it really moves.
The Scoop ride system was the key to unlocking the creativity of the project. It anchored the story and the effects that the team planned to add to it. And around this time is finally where the change you've been expecting happened. DC was playing hard to get, and Universal was fed up with their demands. This led Universal's business team to go to DC's far less popular, at the time, competitor Marvel, and offer a great deal to build the superhero land around Marvel characters instead. The creative team reportedly didn't take this change too well, as they were heavily in development and were somewhat blindsided by the rash change of characters. Luckily for the Superman team, Marvel had one superhero who also works at a newspaper, flies or swings through a city, and has frequent battles with a gang of villains. So Superman became Spider-Man, and that was a lot easier than some of the other concepts. Rest in peace, Batman versus the Penguin. All right, so now that we're actually at The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man, let's talk about what the ride experience is like. I want to note, first off, that I'm going to show footage of the new projection media. The overall experience is pretty much the same, just improved. So I think it'll be easier to watch than an old POV. And I do like to film things myself as much as possible for these videos. So I thought that was the better outcome and better option for this. But before we get into the ride, we have to talk about the queue quickly. The queue is the Daily Bugle, which is a perfect fit. In the first room, guests are introduced to the newest advancement in journalism, the Scoop, the most high-tech news collecting vehicle known to man. As guests continue through the queue, they enter the cubicles of the newsroom, which is strangely empty. Overhead is television news coverage of the latest scheme from the Sinister Syndicate. They have taken control of New York City using Dr. Octopus's new anti-gravity cannon, including having stolen the Statue of Liberty. When it's clear that he has no reporters left, J. Jonah Jameson decides to send the tourists into the Scoop to cover the situation. This sends guests into the loading station. After boarding, you start the ride in the back alleys of New York City when J. Jonah Jameson sets you out on your mission to get the Scoop. As you pass through the streets, the spider signal illuminates in front of you, introducing the webbed hero, or Menace. Shortly after, Spider-Man leaps onto your vehicle, warning you about the imminent danger.
Man, you shouldn't be out here. Doc Ock on the loose, this could be the most dangerous night of my life. And yours. Be careful. Nice shades.
And after a near miss with a truck carrying toxic chemicals, you enter Warehouse 13, where the Sinister Syndicate are hiding out with pieces of the Statue of Liberty. When J. Jonah Jameson blows your cover, the villains spot you and the Scoop.
Hey, what's going on? What was that?
Then the first villain you encounter is Electro, who attempts to deliver a lethal shock to the Scoop, which fails and sends you both flying. After a close encounter with Scream, Dr. Octopus attempts to hit the guest with his anti-gravity cannon, first missing and hitting the head of the Statue of Liberty, and then again hitting a wooden crate. The Scoop and the guests end up spiraling down into the sewers of the city, where Spider-Man tries to send them back to safety before being interrupted by Hydro Man, who soaks the Scoop and nearly sends a pipe into you. After being sent out of the sewers, Dr. Octopus breaks through a brick wall and attempts to use fire to scare the guests away, but not before breaking off the bumper of the Scoop, sending him and the Scoop flying backwards. Then the Scoop gets a view of the Brooklyn Bridge and the New York City skyline before Hobgoblin flies in. Spider-Man saves guests from the first pumpkin bomb and thankfully sends the second one off course and into a nearby building, sending off a fireball. As J. Jonah Jameson laments the damage done to his top-of-the-line Scoop, Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus engage in a one-on-one battle, ultimately leading Dr. Octopus to take aim at the Scoop with his anti-gravity cannon. The Scoop begins floating up high in the New York City skyline. Spider-Man tries to web you down from your heights, but not before he has to face the Sinister Syndicate one final time. He begins by wrapping up Scream, causing his web to send the Scoop crashing into Hobgoblin. Next, Spider-Man takes down Hydro Man and Electro by causing Electro to take aim at Hydro Man accidentally. Dr. Octopus then tries to end it once and for all by disabling the Scoop's anti-gravity, sending it and the guests free-falling 400 feet. Spider-Man shoots down a last-minute web to catch the Scoop, saving the guests and defeating the Sinister Syndicate. As the Scoop makes its way back to the Bugle, Spider-Man has the Syndicate all wrapped up and thanks us for our help, but tells us to not give up our day jobs. Back at the Bugle, Spider-Man has repurposed the anti-gravity cannon as a gift of sorts for J. Jonah Jameson as guests unload the Scoop. When Islands of Adventure opened in 1999, The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man was one of the headlining attractions, and it didn't disappoint. Reception to the ride was immediately overwhelmingly positive from both the casual guests and those in the industry. While most of what was at Islands of Adventure on opening day used existing ride technology, The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man was the exception, and people noticed. The ride would win the Golden Ticket Award for Best Dark Ride 12 years in a row, starting its opening year. This ride is still winning awards to this day. Like, in November of 2024, it took home the Thea Classic Award for standing the test of time, which was a welcome surprise when working on this video. The ride showed the general public that Universal could not only keep up with Disney in the world of ride technology, but even in some cases, exceed them. The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man has shaped every dark ride after it in one way or another. While the ride itself didn't necessarily invent much new technology, what it did was effortlessly combine a wide array of technology, all working together to create a seamless story and experience. While rides previously had motion simulation, tracked vehicles, 3D screens, and a ton of practical effects, none combined them to the extent that Spider-Man was able to. The best way to see the impact of Spider-Man is to look at the flagship dark rides that have opened since: Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, Transformers The Ride 3D, Mystic Manor, Remy's Ratatouille Adventure, Rise of the Resistance, and Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. Have any of these rides pushed the ride experience of dark rides further than The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man? I don't think any do to the same extent that Spider-Man took the genre forward. That's not to say I can't see why people would prefer some of these rides to Spider-Man, but what I'm talking about here is how Spider-Man was able to combine all the technological advancements of over 2 decades of ride technology in a way that served the story and immersed the riders far beyond what had been done previously. Some newer rides also don't balance the amount of practical integration to virtual sets that Spider-Man does. The world of a comic book required a lot of screens to be used. However, Universal blended those screens into practical sets at every opportunity they could. None more impressive than the variety of moving projections and set pieces that are used to achieve the levitation scene at the end. That effect only works so well because of the mixture of practical and digital, and many subsequent rides have missed the mark on this blending of reality and virtual. Now, I know your first thought probably is, what about trackless ride vehicles like Rise of the Resistance? I know this might be controversial. I don't necessarily see those as the leap forward they're made out to be. Maybe if more rides were built in the style of how Tokyo Disneyland utilizes them to create kind of unexpected ride paths and still maintain theming on the floor and not feel like a warehouse. But with the trade-offs that come with trackless ride vehicles in the US parks, I don't think they've pushed dark rides drastically forward. Now, Rise of the Resistance is the closest to pushing dark rides as forward as Spider-Man, with its addition of the drop shaft. However, Spider-Man's ability to simulate that experience in a way that feels correct for the comic book world you're in makes it feel more iterative than impactful. This ride also proved that thrill elements can be incorporated effectively into a dark ride without sacrificing storytelling or rideability. Using simulated speed with large projection screens and synchronized vehicle movements created a comic book feeling of action and thrill without being too much for the average guest. While Rise of the Resistance has added those thrill elements, Spider-Man did it 20 years earlier. Another part of this is the longevity of the ride. The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man has maintained its popularity since opening, with wait times typically sitting around 30 minutes on any given day. With this continued popularity, Universal went in and did a major refresh of the ride in 2012, keeping everything in top shape while also swapping out the projectors and the projected media to new higher quality renders.
The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man has been revamped, and the team behind it says expect new energy and thrills. And I'm getting a sneak peek on the day that it is back open, but I gotta wear my new Spider Vision glasses to check it out.
We had a chance to make it even better, so that's what we decided to do, and I think we've really done a great job just making it even more dynamic, more colorful, more intense.
This also meant switching the 3D glasses to a new Infotech system that, while it made it easier for guests sensitive to 3D content, also made it harder for me to film, so sorry about that. But for a company like Universal to not just invest in maintaining the ride, but also to plus it, shows how special they see this ride as well, and not just because it holds Spider-Man captive from Disney or Orlando. I still personally believe that The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man is the best dark ride that I've ever been on. And I'll continue to say that until something comes along that completely changes my view on what a dark ride can be. Okay, now to get into the part of this video that I actually made this whole video for. I just wanted an opportunity to talk about all the details of this ride that just make me love it. Now, this is going to be kind of disjointed, but it's fun. So, first off, the voice cast of this ride is incredible. Dr. Octopus is voiced by Roger Bumpus, who you probably know better as Squidward Tennis Balls from SpongeBob. Similarly, Hydro Man is voiced by Bill Fagerbakke, who is definitely better known as Patrick Star from SpongeBob. J. Jonah Jameson is voiced by Chris Edgerly, who's probably better known as the voice of Spider-Man from this ride. Yeah, Chris Edgerly voices both J. Jonah Jameson and Spider-Man in this ride. Like, just listen to this.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Chris Edgerly. That's right, the voice of Peter Parker and the Amazing Spider-Man and J. Jonah Jameson on The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man ride. Boy, that's a mouthful right there. Huh. All right, listen up. This is J. Jonah Jameson. And if it's motivation you want, how about this? In the meantime, stay safe and be careful. Nice shades. Huh. Some of you.
And for good measure, here's Electro's voice actor Jim Wise reprising his role.
If you think now is the time to relax, you're in for quite a shock.
Next, the original plan for the animation was actually to use motion capture of, athletes. But their motion didn't end up feeling superhuman enough. So they ended up manually animating every single aspect of the ride film, which greatly increased the scope of the project. The production company and Universal also worked to develop a new rendering process for the ride film that was called squinching. This distorted the animation in sync with the ride vehicle's motion to counteract the perspective of the ride vehicle and make the 3D work in a moving environment. The original ride film was also actually printed onto actual film, which just sounds like a logistical nightmare, but I guess it was probably more of a proven technology to use at the time. The ride was also one of the first uses of rear projection in a theme park ride, which is the same technology that Disney would end up using on their projected animatronic faces for a bit. Now, there are 4 Stan Lee cameos featured throughout the ride, as well as 4 Iron Man references hidden. I'm going to let you know where the Stan Lee ones are because they're a little bit more obvious, but I want you to go find the Iron Man ones for yourself next time you ride. The first Stan Lee is driving the truck that almost crashes into you. The second is entering the movie theater. The third is shocked when you land in Spider-Man's web. And the last one is in the back left corner of the finale scene. Stan Lee also voices the unload spiel.
Good job, Team Scoop. You did great. Now when the scoop comes to a stop, carefully raise your left arm and exit the vehicle. Make sure you take all your personal belongings, and you can drop off the night vision goggles in the bins provided. Now, I'd better see about getting Mr. Jameson down. See you later.
Now, J. Jonah Jameson also definitely uses some choice language for Spider-Man when you're almost hit by the truck. It's kind of interesting to hear in a theme park ride, but just listen. Now, if you look closely at the ground throughout the ride, you can catch some glimpses of lights that are used to illuminate the real props around the screens, in sync with the ride film, to really seamlessly blend the two worlds. For example, in the warehouse scene, green lights illuminate the crates and shelves around the screen when Doc Ock activates the anti-gravity cannon. Another thing towards the end of the warehouse scenes is that there's actually just a control point that's used for ride breakdowns, left fully visible just because it blends in with all the industrial theming around it. Most rides you'll see these are covered by like metal doors to hide them from guest view, but it just worked in this case, so they left it open. Now these next two are my favorite type of Easter eggs that you can find in rides. When you enter the theater scene, you'll see references to the ride's creators. If you look to the left, you'll see a sign for the Coup, which is a reference to Terry Coup. And also if you pronounce it Terry Coop, it sounds like the Scoop. So could be either, but I'm assuming it was to his name. At the same time, on the right, you'll see a sign pointing back towards the previous scene at the Brooklyn Bridge. However, instead of saying Brooklyn Bridge, it says Trowbridge. Scott Trowbridge. Also, the theater itself is named Excelsior, which was Stan Lee's catchphrase. You can also find a phone number to the theater that over the years has had different themed messages. The number, if you want to call it, is 407-224-1783.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. My spider senses are telling me that you'll be visiting Universal Orlando Resort soon. I hope you have an amazing adventure. Make sure to swing by and see me when you're here.
He hung up on me, how rude. Also, kind of a weird thing for an Easter egg in a ride that it references you making a trip to the resort soon and says you should ride my ride. When to get an Easter egg, you have to be on the ride. They should really think that through again. When Doc Ock hits the Scoop with his anti-gravity cannon, there's underglow lighting in the Scoop itself that is activated to match the green glow around things hit by the cannon. Then, when you reach the scene with Hydro Man and Electro, you might notice it's one of the few scenes with a themed ceiling, because the perspective of that scene is you looking up, so it had to have a themed ceiling, because the ceiling is actually the screen. Then, when you're caught by Spider-Man's web at the end of the finale scenes, the manhole cover in front of you says "Not an exit," which is just one of those little details that made me laugh when I first noticed it. And finally, when Islands of Adventure was under construction, almost all the rides were being constantly ridden and tested by basically any Universal employee at the time for months before opening. Spider-Man, though, was the exception to this, with the ride construction being kept very secretive until the opening of the park. All of these little details and Easter eggs make me really appreciate the ride more and more every time I'm on it, and I'm constantly discovering new things. Now, I know I've probably missed hundreds and hundreds of them, and I look forward to finding those new ones all the time. The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man perfected the concept of a dark ride, in my opinion. The ride brought together the technology that would become staples of every dark ride since, and combined them in a way that has stood the test of time. While rides have iterated on this technology in the years since, I don't think a ride has taken the same leap forward that The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man did. In the meantime, parks have tried to make rides interactive and trackless, but both have come with trade-offs that Spider-Man didn't end up with. I'm just excited to see what's next, and more importantly, when that next major step forward in the world of dark rides will come. thank you so much for watching. I originally thought this was going to be a lot shorter of a video, but pretty quickly I realized I had a lot more to say about this ride than I thought I did. So if you're watching all the way to the end here, I really appreciate it. And I'm glad someone else enjoys listening to me ramble about the Spider-Man ride for however long this video's been. But yeah, if you're here, like, subscribe, comment your thoughts. I know people will disagree with this one, but I'd love to know why in a somewhat respectful manner, please. My mom does read these comments, so please just be nice. But anyways, I'm gonna go see about getting Mr. Jameson down while I'm here.